So let's take a few questions from the reporters, and I always like to start with the local reporters first, and then we'll do to the national folks if we got time afterwards.
You're tuned in to Kaz TV.
If you find anything on this page valuable or informative, make sure to share, like, and subscribe. It's an easy way to help support what we're doing, get the message out there, and help us create more content that you like. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. All right, should be done by now. Let's get back to the video. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. JD Vance has been on a roll lately. And whether you agree with him or not, there's something refreshing about how he's handling this campaign. He was recently at a rally where he took unscripted questions from the media. Not scripted, not polished, and it's not something you see from an everyday politician. Let's take a look at the video.
So let's take a few questions from the reporters, and I always like to start with the local reporters first, and then we'll do to the national folks if we got time afterwards.
Senator Vance, first of all, congratulations on last night's debate.
Thank you.
I did get a chance to speak to some voters here before you stepped on stage. I spoke to Jeffrey and Bert, and they said that they loved how the debate was civil and policy focused. But then I also got some opportunity to speak to voters outside of the event, and I got a question from Robert from Pontiac, and it's a two-part question. I hope you can answer it.
Sure.
So the first part is, with issues where Americans are divided, if elected as the next vice president, how will you bring folks together, especially from the other party? And if there is an issue you disagree with Donald Trump, how will you make your voice heard for the people?
Well, so you said the person who asked that question is named Robert?
Correct.
So my message to Robert on the first question is, look, I think that the reason this country feels so divided is because of failed leadership and nothing else. You talk to, and look, I genuinely believe this. With a lot of folks who are going to vote against me and Donald Trump, there are a lot of people out there who are fundamentally good human beings, but the leadership of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, is an absolute disgrace. And here's the way, again, why do we have so much division? And why do we have so much rancor in this country's political debate? It's because Kamala Harris and her allies are trying to silence the American people rather than engage with them. When you try to censor your fellow citizens, when you try to shut them up, you breed division and hatred. Donald Trump and I are going to bring this country back together by encouraging the free exchange of ideas and this idea that our leaders ought to persuade their fellow citizens, not try to shut them up, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do. Open this country up. Open up the dialogue and open up the debate, and that is how you bring American citizens back together in these divided times. But on the second question about what do you do when you disagree with Donald Trump, the answer is, first of all, Donald Trump is at the top of the Republican ticket. He will be the next president of the United States. I've got two responsibilities. The first is to support the president in enacting an agenda that I believe is going to lead to rising take-home pay and lower inflation for American citizens. That's number one. But of course, if I disagree with the president, it is my responsibility to talk to him about it and to offer honest counsel in private. And one of the things that I love about Donald Trump is that he takes advice and feedback from everybody. As much as, you know, it's funny when the president, the only conversation that he and I ever had about whether I might become his vice presidential nominee was the Saturday before the convention. If you remember, that was the Saturday where he was shot in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I saw him that morning in Florida. We ended our conversation. He hopped in a plane and flew to Pennsylvania, where, of course, an assassin nearly took his life. And you know what the president told me? He said that he talked to everybody about who his vice presidential nominee should be. And I think that's one of the great things is he's willing to take feedback. Of course, he makes the final decision, but he's willing to take inputs from everybody. And he even said that he was talking to the Mar-a-Lago gardener about who the vice presidential nominee should be. And I said, well, sir, what the hell did the Mar-a-Lago gardener say? Because this affects my life. I'm very curious what these people you're talking to are saying about this very important decision. But I think that it's one of the great things about his leadership style is he is in charge, he is in command, but he makes decisions after getting as much information as possible, and that's how the country should be led. You know, it actually raised an important question, you know, Robert, and I know, of course, the journalist who's asking this question. Look, one of the things that people in D.C. say about Kamala Harris, and it's Democrats that say this, it's people she served with in the Senate, and it's also Republicans. And of course they say this in private, but they'll say Kamala Harris is very insecure. She doesn't like to be challenged. If you don't like to be challenged and you don't like to engage in open debate, you should be nowhere near the Oval Office of the United States of America. Next question.
Thank you. Charlie Langton from Fox News, WLBJ here.
Hey, Charlie.
I talked to a lot of people here. They also said you were very cordial last night in the debate, and the message got through. But compare your style to Donald Trump's style, where he was a little aggressive. Do you think that Donald Trump's message sometimes is lost because of his aggressive style?
No, Charlie, look, I think, first of all, there is a media caricature out there of Donald Trump that is so different from the man that I've come to know. And I think that, you know, when he called me last night, you know what he said? He asked me how my wife was doing. And he said, you know, you just had a hell of a debate. I'm sure that you were nervous. You had every right to be nervous, but go and have a nice meal with your wife and go and enjoy this moment. Like, that's the Donald Trump that I know. People say, now look, the other thing I love about Donald Trump, and I think it's true of all of us, we can be so devoted to and so grateful to this country and its incredible opportunities, but then also be kind of pissed off that the leadership is failing this great nation. There's no there's no tension in saying, on the one hand, we've got the greatest country in the world, and on the other hand, Kamala Harris is doing everything she can to screw it up. And I love that Donald Trump can do both of those things at the same time. He can go out there and talk to the American people and be warm and engaged. He can talk to a normal American citizen about their struggles in paying for groceries and housing under Kamala Harris's policies. And then he can go on a debate stage and tell Kamala Harris that she ought to stop screwing up and she ought to stop talking about solving the country's problems. She ought to go and actually do it. That's the kind of president we need. That's the kind of leader that we need. And I think his message gets through. Thank you. Next question.
Hey, Senator. Craig Mauger from the Detroit News newspaper here. You were talking about your opposition to EV mandates. My question is, do you think the government should have any role in incentivizing, providing financial assistance to battery plants, to electric vehicle plants? Michigan is poised to benefit from some of these investments. Will you allow those to go forward? Will you try to interfere with those? Thank you.
Well, look, I think there's certainly a role, and I believe this, I know Donald Trump believes this, in encouraging innovation, but there's a difference between promoting innovation and sending hundreds of billions of dollars to favored industries that make their products in China. These are two very, very different things. And here's the problem with a lot of these EV mandates is that this money was supposed to go to American workers, but Kamala Harris's IRS found every way possible to allow that EV subsidy to go to manufacturers in China and not in the United States of America. And here's the other problem with it. It's not just auto jobs that we're worried about here. Think about all the people who make carburetors. Think about all the people who make transmissions. There's an entire supply chain in the auto industry that China dominates when it comes to EVs and America dominates when it comes to gas-powered cars. So before we go and subsidize the EV industry, let's open up the American supply chain for that industry so that American workers and American consumers benefit. All of the minerals all of the rare earth materials, a lot of the battery technology, a lot of the supply chain for these electric vehicles is made in China. And with the one hand, Kamala Harris wants to make it harder to build that supply chain in the United States of America. And with the other hand, she wants to send money to an industry that's built in China. It's disgraceful, and we got to stop doing it. Invest in American workers, not in Chinese workers and Chinese firms. And I know we unfortunately have to go to our next stop in the great state of Michigan. So I'll take one more question, and then I'll offer a final observation. Then we'll hit the road.
Hi, Senator. Will Jones from Local 4.
Hey, Will.
I spoke with some elected officials or election officials last week about their concern about people who are trying to undermine our elections. Why didn't you answer the question last night during the debate about who won the 2020 presidential election?
Well, look, here's the simple reason. The media is obsessed with talking about the election of 4 years ago. I'm focused on the election of 33 days from now because I want to throw Kamala Harris out of office and get back to common sense economic policies. But I also think you can believe that America needs to have secure and free elections, but also talk about the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, Democrats in the U.S. Congress blocked a piece of legislation that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. If you believe in American democracy, if you believe in our constitutional republic, you should be trying to strengthen American election integrity and not weaken it. So we're going to talk about election integrity because I believe that every vote ought to count, but only the legally cast votes, and that's why we fight for election integrity, and that's why we care so much about it. Now this actually leads me into my next point, because I want to talk about, look, Democrats, whether they agree with what Donald Trump and I say about some of the criticisms we have, for example, I think that we make it way too easy for people to fraudulently vote in this country, okay? I think that we should have passed the SAVE Act that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. Apparently, Kamala Harris disagrees because she fought that legislation every step of the way. But the reason why Kamala Harris should actually sign on with our pro-election integrity efforts, things like common sense voter ID, is because it gives the American people confidence in the most important thing that we do when it comes to our government, which is voting. I want every American to have confidence. And by the way, to all of you listening out there, I believe that we are going to have the safest and most secure election in 2024 that we've had, because the RNC is fighting for election integrity in a way that it frankly wasn't 4 years ago.
This is JD in real time, engaging directly with the media in front of all his fan base. No teleprompters, no rehearsed lines, no papers, no scripts. In front of an audience, in front of his entire base. And he's willing to take the questions right there in front of everybody. Whether you agree with him or not, you've got to admit he's being upfront, he's being transparent, and you're seeing where he stands on the issues. Taking unscripted questions comes with risk. He could easily stumble. It could be an opportunity for the media to clip up some of the things he said because he misspoke. But the fact that he's willing to do that, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of voters. It seems very authentic and shows that he's a really sharp individual, as we saw in the last debate. If you haven't seen that video, check it out right here. It feels really authentic, which is something that's rare in politicians today. Now, on the flip side, we've got Kamala and her team who takes a more cautious approach to interviews. You don't often see her taking spontaneous questions, especially from media outlets that lean a little bit to the right, far right, or even right there in the middle. Usually her interviews are very controlled in a safe environment that the host or the outlet usually agrees with 99% of her stance on things. Now, when she does happen to do interviews, two things happen. The interviewer asks her a question about a specific answer and a specific topic, and she does one of two things. One, she either changes her stance completely on what it used to be, or two, she goes into storytelling. I talk a little bit more about that in this video. She recently did an interview with the All the Smoke podcast, and this is how it went.
So we're running short on time. Okay. We're going to finish up with quick hitters. First thing to come to mind, let us know. Oh, cannabis?
Your views on cannabis? Yeah. I just feel strongly people should not be going to jail for smoking weed. And we know historically what that has meant and who has gone to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I just think we have come to a point where we have to understand that we need to legalize it and stop criminalizing this behavior. And I've actually, this is not a new position for me. I have felt for a long time we need to legalize it. So that's where I am on that.
So this is one example of how she shifted her view completely. Back in 2010, she was firmly against marijuana use, saying, and I quote, "I am not in favor of legalizing marijuana." That was in 2010, not 1990, not 1980 something. This was fairly recent. At one time she was prosecuting these people. Now she's in support of an act that supports marijuana legalization. Now Tulsi Gabbard did push her on this issue back in the election of 2020.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence.
She shakes her head like it didn't happen, but let's fact check it.
In the hands of somebody who is impaired. So that needs to be addressed also. But I am absolutely in favor of legalizing marijuana. We've got to do it. We have incarcerated so many, in particular young men and young men of color, in a way that we have not for the same level of use other young men. Mm-hmm. And we've got to deal with that, in addition to dealing with the fact that not all drugs are the same. And when we're talking about marijuana, look, I have forever been an advocate for medicinal marijuana. I have personally known people who only benefited from its use. So there are a lot of reasons why we need to legalize.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like
and I inhale. I did inhale.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. But yes.
I know you have to go. They say you have to go.
I just broke news.
I mean, was it in college? Uh-huh. See, I like stuff like that. That's a real honest answer.
Real.
Was it a blunt or joint?
It was a joint.
Hey.
Yeah.
You remember the high?
I do.
So if it was legalized all throughout the country and medicinal, would you do it?
Listen,
again?
I think that it gives a lot of people joy, and we need more joy.
We need more joy in this world.
So she was prosecuting people and saying she's against marijuana use while she's actually using it. And then her stance has changed. And when she's asked about specific policies, this is what she does. She typically avoids the question and tells a story, and then doesn't really get to the answer of what her specific plan is. When it comes to the economic plan, when people ask specifics about it, you'll notice she always goes to, I grew up in a middle-class home. My mom did this, my mom did that. And then we're sitting there waiting. What's the plan? What are you going to do? And they always ask specifically, what is your plan? And then it goes into a story.
Economy, small business, black business. We actually just started our business in January. So we've grown from a show to a whole entire company. What is your economic plan moving forward for people who are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling for groceries and rent and homeowners?
So look, I grew up, so my sister and I were raised by our mother. We lived for a long time in an apartment on top of a child care center. That child care center was actually owned by a woman who lived 2 doors down from us, Mrs. Shelton, who was, by all of our accounts and feelings, our second mother. She helped raise us. And so she was a small business owner. So I'll start with the small business, and congratulations on what you guys have done. I, from a child, knew who our small business owners are, right? I mean, you're business leaders, but you're also civic leaders. You take seriously your voice and how you can mentor, how you can grow, right? Communities and the sense of communities.
Which is an effective strategy, because when you get into storytelling, people get caught up in the emotion of the story and they tend to forget about the facts and the logic in the question they were asking before. So it is effective. Personal stories can be compelling, but we'll find out whether or not voters want something more specific. Here's the key difference between Trump's campaign with Vance and Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. Vance is out here being open, taking questions on the spot from the media in front of his base with a transparency that resonates with a lot of voters, even those who may not agree with his policies. Meanwhile, Harris's approach may come off as not authentic to a lot of voters, especially when she's not clear on certain topics like her stance on when abortion should be legal, when it shouldn't, and her economic plan. Repeatedly giving the same rehearsed lines can create a sense of detachment with the voters. So the question becomes, do you like the approach that Vance and Trump and that campaign is taking, where they're basically jumping into the lion's den, taking interviews from whoever, even from groups that may not agree with them, or the more controlled, polished, scripted approach that the Harris campaign's taking? There's no right or wrong answer here. It just comes down to what you feel is more important in a leader. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time.